Well, I had a question for you. So just a little while ago, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, was Shavuot, or for those of you that don't know, that's otherwise known as Pentecost or the Feast of Weeks. And there's this thing where it goes basically for, 7 periods of 7 days, and then on the fifth, so that's like 49 days, and then on the 50th day, that's when Shavuot is, right?
Yeah, it's actually a counting of days and weeks. 7 weeks and 50 days.
And is there symbolism behind that? Because I think about 7 times 7, and then it's like you have a number that represents perfection, completion, and then you have these seven sevens, and then on the 50th day, that's like when it all wraps up. What's the new like the numeric symbolism behind that?
Well, seven is, as you can imagine, from 7 days of creation, right? So creation in the physical world, in physics, for example, is time and space, right? That's really, if you melt down creation to its ultimate essence, it's time and it's space. And the relationship of time and space creates motion and all the rest of these things. And all physical properties sit within. That's why everything that is won't be, and so on, because they deteriorate, because the time and space ratio wears them and wears it away, like our lives as well. So seven is always symbolized because it's the fundamental number of time and space, because you have seven directions in space: north, east, west, south, up, down, and then center. And you have seven positions in time, which are what you would call Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So 7 times of day times 7 types of, of time versus times 7 times of space is 49. So therefore, 7 times 7 is every aspect of time and space. And when you transcend time and space, you move into that which is beyond time and space, or what you might refer to more as a prophetic zone, right? In today's world, we're trapped in the pathetic zone. But in those days, they had the prophetic zone. And the prophetic zone was a much better zone to be in, because you were dealing with very wise people. And the idea of prophecy, therefore, is, I'm going to have to dip a little into Hebrew here, but Moses died on, remember the name of the mountain?
We've talked about it before, but
It's not a test, don't worry. It's Mount Nebo.
okay.
Now, Nebo can also can be broken down to be understood as Nun, like the Nun of Nebo, and Nun is the Hebrew letter for 50, the number you're referring to. And then the word Bo is to come, to arrive. So he came to the mountain, which he arrived at the 50th, right? He reached that final pinnacle of 50, of perfection, as you called it earlier, at that end of his life. Now, once he accessed it, what did he do with that Nun, which is 50? He gave it to his student. In Hebrew, his name is Yeshua ben Nun, or Joshua, like the book of Joshua. But his full name is the disciple or son of Nun, which is, again, the Nun, the 50. So Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, or Mount Nebo, and he gets on the highest spiritual level that perfection, and he gives it to his student, who then goes down into the physical world, the land of Israel, and with him brings that Nun from the highest to the lowest. That's the whole idea of the holiday of Shavuot. Same symbolism. Moses goes up on the highest of the highest, 40 days, 40 nights, no eating, no drinking, and he's there alone with God, and God transmits the Torah to him. And then he comes down, and with a little hiccup on the way, they spend 40 years in the desert, which was like the ultimate yeshiva of just doing nothing day or night, because your clothes continued to grow with you, and food landed right at your door. So, the cloud that covered them was air conditioning. You needed reading light. You had the big fire at night for that, I guess, and also marshmallows. But there you were for 40 years. What Moses did in 40 days, you now had 40 years to do. And that was learn all of the Torah. So then when Joshua would finally come into the land of Israel, that highest wisdom would now be implemented on the most practical level. So that's the 7 times 7. 7 times 7 is transition beyond time and space and into the world of prophecy. And that's why on the 50th day, we actually don't count that number. We count all the numbers from Passover. That we count 49, but we don't count the 50th because you can't count infinite. And then, of course, the larger buckets are the weeks, and they too are 7 weeks. So that's all of that is kind of culminating, if you will, into the doorway or portal to the infinite, which is what Shavuot is all about. And the word Shavuot, it's interesting in itself. Obviously, on one hand, it sounds like the Hebrew word for weeks. Shavuah, modern Hebrew is a week. Shavuot would be plural.
Mm-hmm.
But it also means an oath. Like when God created man, meaning M-A-L and F-E-M-L-E, right? Man and woman is, when we use the word man, it doesn't mean male, it means man and woman equally. And so when God created the human, I'll try that, maybe it's better. When God created human, the unique power, which we're using right now of that creation, is speech. We're called the medaber, the ones that speak. Oh, everyone gets all crazy about porpoises, but I don't think their vocabulary and the variety of different languages quite reaches mankind. But nonetheless, you have speech. Now, if you look at this, the speech is like the holiest power that you have in the physical world because it's completely non-physical, but yet it comes from within you, which is spiritual, and out into the physical world. That's why speech, i.e. prayer and other forms of speech, is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. So now the simplest level of speech in Hebrew is called lisoach or sicha. Sicha is like chatter. It's like when somebody sends you a TikTok. You're not going to become a wiser, richer, more intelligent human being by having watched that TikTok. And the proof is, tell me what TikTok you watched 8 weeks ago. So therefore, that's just called blah, blah. But it's still speech. That's where the word Passover comes from. In Hebrew, the word Passover is pronounced Pesach. Peh means mouth, sach, which talks. That's what Passover is. The opening of the mouth, communication, which is a big flaw in today's world. Nobody's into communicating. Nobody's into hearing the other side because they've already decided the other side's wrong before they even had a chance to speak. I remember when I was a kid growing up in America, we were always taught that you're innocent until proven guilty. Now I look at social media, you're guilty before and now you have to have the burden of proving that you're innocent. We'll leave that. Anyhow, so Pesach is the mouth that speaks. Now, what's one notch up higher, a more evolved human form of speech, is romantic speech. Romance doesn't necessarily mean male, female. I mean, romance could be you go out and you look at a flower and you're touched by the beauty of creation. But romance is you see the love in creation. You don't just see the actual physical items. You see the physical, and more than that, you see the love of God behind what everything is in creation. So that is actually where I think that I have a source for this, that the French word l'amour, which means to love, comes from the Hebrew word la'amor, which means to speak lovingly.
Oh, it comes from that.
I have a source. I don't know if it's a valid source, a good source. I didn't really care enough to do more deep dive, but somebody had pointed that out.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was no French around in those days, so it evolved from something.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyhow, but the point being is that now you have the next level, which is called la'amor, which is to speak lovingly. So that word Omar, speak lovingly, is the same phonetic as the Omer, which is counted, the counting of the
count. Yeah.
Right. So it teaches us when you count through the 49 days of the Omer, what you're doing is a total workout on self-analysis. What do you do in every position in time and space? What do you do? Are you over this corner? Do you speak nicely or do you speak angrily? You over here? Do you give the guy suspicion or do you give him a benefit of the doubt? Every aspect of time and space that you live in, we all live in, what did you do with each? If you made them into boxes, What would you say about each box? That's what we're doing. Now, the problem is, like Don Quixote, once you look in the mirror, you could collapse and have a nervous breakdown. Right? Because as long as you still think you're fighting windmills, then you feel like, oh, because you're not you, God forbid. One is trapped in their fantasy. But when sometimes faced with a mirror to your face, people can't handle that. You can't really, it's much easier to blame other people or pass the buck than to take the, buck stops here. I don't really hear that anymore. So that idea of the buck stops here means you take responsibility. So, but that can be very difficult. So therefore, we're taught to, when you do that, do it lovingly. Be sympathetic and forgiving for your sins. Don't be heavy-handed, because heavy-handed is only going to get you a rebel or get you depressed. Neither of those are a win situation. But if you do it lovingly, like, okay, what was, let's forget about the past and let's focus on the future. How do we make it better? That's a positive attitude that really warrants, therefore, cleaning out the chametz, the leavened bread from your house, i.e. your life. So therefore, that's the counting. So now it just went from sikha, blah, blah, to meaningful conversation about the most important thing in the world, you. Right? That's all you got is you. And that's the only one they're going to talk to you about upstairs. They're not going to say, whoa, hold on, God, before we get to that thing that I once did that you're about to show me the video that I really wish you wouldn't play here, couldn't we first talk about Israel passing the law about religious people being drafted? Ain't going to happen. It's not even going to be up there. We don't want to talk about you. Once you can clean house and really get your acting, when I say you, I mean me, I mean all of us.
Right.
So then you come to the highest level of speech, which is an oath. You can actually swear to the truth because the truth has become 100% clear to you. And therefore, that relationship of the truth is something. Sorry. I was up in the north all day, and so like everything that I blew off is catching up with me now. So therefore, that's why the holiday name is also not just weeks, but also means oath. Shavua means that now that I'm receiving the Torah, I can clearly see what is the will of God without any bias, prejudice, or what I would like it to be. By the way, I came up with a great expression that I coined today. Feel free to steal it. I don't mind. Okay. But it's a great psychological expression. I think it's great, but that's not really good judgment. Psychological expression. It's called obstacle illusion.
Obstacle illusion?
Right. How many people are paralyzed by obstacle illusions?
You mean like you're preconceiving, or like you think something's going on when really it's just in your head? It's an illusion. Right. If you actually tested it, you may find out that it's not even true.
That's right.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot over the last couple of years, actually, in my own life.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me just do a quick review. So 40 would be like a time of learning, receiving. Is that right?
40 is incubation.
Incubation?
Yes. Okay. The sperm in the egg in the mommy doesn't become a human until 40th day of conception, for example. Noah went through 40 days and 40 nights that the world was immersed in a mikveh, in a holy body of water to be purified.
Mm-hmm.
The volume of water in a real mikveh is, the measurement's called a saw, but it's 40 saw. Moses was 3 times on Mount Sinai, 40 days, 40 nights. Jews were in the desert 40 years. So that number 40, because it's the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, always represents like getting things back to balance, getting them back to where they should be, incubating something new. So in the
incubating something new and then getting things into balance. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, and just really quick with the mikveh, that's with all mikvahs. It's supposed to be that measurement, 40. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That would be, let's say, man-made mikvahs. I mean, if you jumped in the ocean, that's a mikvah, and that's way beyond 40 saw.
I only asked that because I know that right now they're like excavating the pool of Siloam, and because like I guess they found it in recent times. It's kind of a big story among Bible enthusiasts and stuff. I think it's really neat. Um,
Hmm. I've been
seems
there.
like what was that?
I've been there.
Is that like that same measurement? Like because it seems pretty
Ah,
large. I don't
you're a
know.
sharp dude. Okay. Now that I've been to Texas, I've learned to be careful with you Midwesterners.
There you go. Yeah.
You got a good shot. That's an excellent question. And you're right. Your observation is you nailed it. Because if you look at it just as it is, it's clearly not enough. They're too small. It's almost like you got to get in there like an embryonic position, right? That's not 40 saw. So what you don't know is the schematic of how it's hardwired in the back and how you're able to use certain types of tunnel water to be able to connect multiple mikvot to create a sum total of the right amount, which is
Okay.
what they did.
Okay. 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 So 40, a number of being like rebalanced, yeah, like rebalanced or balanced, a number of incubation, and then 49 is essentially a representation of all time and space, essentially. And then 50 would be going beyond that, transcending that. And so I guess that same concept would be associated with the like the Jubilee cycle. I know that it's not
50.
observed right now, right? Because it
So it can't be. It
requires,
can't be observed without the temple.
yeah.
But
So,
think about what happens on that, right? All the slaves are free. All the original landowners reclaim their land. The land is left fallow. It's like and it's called the freedom year because it's not, it can't be bound to the physical world anymore because it's 50. It transcends, the laws, if you will, of ownership on one level.
yeah. And I'm wondering if any sort of, I guess probably not. I've never seen this, but like I know that, okay, so let's shift from spring to autumn. I know that Elul is supposed to be a month where you're reflecting. Um, you're supposed to be getting prepared for the high holidays. Um, are there any like 49s or 50s there? Because I know especially during the 10 days of
You
awe,
can
that's like
do this.
really crunch time when you're supposed to like really get prepared for Yom
Okay,
Kippur.
good, good, excellent. So you're going to do the math here. You just pulled up the 10 days. What's the first of the 10 days?
What's the first one?
What is the first of those 10 days?
Rosh Hashanah.
Which is
Um,
how you translate the words Rosh Hashanah.
head of the year.
Right, the new year. Exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's the new year, it's also the new month.
Yeah. But
Right.
like is there like a 49 in that or a
Oh, no,
50?
oh, no, no. Time out. We're going for the 40.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. So in Jewish calendar, how many days are in a month?
I've never thought about that.
Oh, fair enough. There's
But
30.
there's always, yeah, so every single month is always it's always
Oh, there
30.
are exceptions, but that's basically they're always called 30. And if there's another one, it's called a pregnant month. So it's never called a regular month.
Is that referring to Adar 2?
No, 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 that's different. That's a kind of how we do leap years. Instead of putting in like one day, we put a whole month in every few years. That rebalances the calendar for us. Because don't forget, we work with solar and lunar. I believe the Western world is only solar, and I believe the Muslim world is only lunar.
Oh, but you do both. Now that's something I didn't know. I thought that yours was only lunar as well.
Sure not. Let's take a look at an only lunar calendar. Let's look at the Islamic calendar. They have a big holiday called Ramadan. I'm sure you've heard about it since 90% of America is now Muslim. So, or maybe 92, I'm not sure. I haven't kept up.
It's
But
something like
anyhow,
that.
that's okay. That's all right. As long as they're not the ones that are crazy, but things are getting a little crazy over there. Okay. So they have a holiday called Ramadan. What time of the year does Ramadan come out?
When I think about it, I feel like it just kind of shifts all over the place.
Exactly. It can come out anywhere in the 12 months because it's lunar. What time of the year is Easter, or better, Christmas? When does Christmas come out? Have you ever celebrated Christmas in August?
No, no, that's purely solar.
Yeah, there you go. So Christmas is always there. Something which is lunar is not locked down at all because it's only in the moon. So therefore, Ramadan can be anywhere. But in the Jewish calendar, which morphs the two, Passover is always in the spring, Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah is always in the autumn, which if we were pure lunar, it should have the same movement like Ramadan.
Right. I guess I
Anyhow,
just assumed because I never like bothered to do the math. I just assumed that the leap month of Adar, well, is it Adar 1 or Adar 2? I was reading something that was kind of complicated. That was saying like no, well, actually it's Adar 1 that's the leap month, I think.
of course, man, you talk to the Jews. You think it's gonna be simple?
Well, anyway, I thought that it was I thought that like corrected it somehow because I never like again I've never done the
Oh, it
math.
does. That does do that. You're right. That does the overall correction. But
Yeah.
then there's correction sometimes in the specific scene of the moon that might make it a full moon, sorry, a full month, or what's called a pregnant month. But the point is that the month of Elul has 30 days. You
Okay.
just quoted Elul as a time of self-reflection and growth, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
30 plus 10 is 40.
Yeah. Okay. So
And what
you have that time of incubation and rebalancing. Um,
But and why is it 40 days there? Because that was the third time that Moses came down from Mount Sinai. He went up on the first day of Elul for the third time, and he came down 40 days later, just like he did the first and the second time. And this time he came with the second tablets. That would probably be the Apple 13 or something like that. And he came down with them. And that day that we actually got the tablets was or is Yom Kippur, 40 days from the beginning of the month of Elul.
okay. So is the first time of him coming down, is that commemorated with Shavuot that represents the first time he came down?
No, that's the first time he went up. He went up on Shavuot, and then 40 days later was when he broke the first tablets.
Okay.
You
So
remember
so 40
that?
days after Shavuot, that's when he would have come down and broken the tablets.
That's the 17th of the month of Tammuz.
Okay.
If you saw the Mel Brooks version, History of the World,
No, I don't think so.
uh, so Mel Brooks is playing Moses, and he's gotten the tablets, and he's coming out, and he's got three of them. And he says, I bring you the 15. He drops one. Whoops, the 10 commandments.
Okay. So the first 40 days, like starting with first fruits, right? The day of first fruits, because that's like when the Omer count starts, or like the second day of Pesach. Isn't that the same as Bikurim?
No, not exactly. Bikurim are brought to the temple on the holiday of Shavuot.
Okay, but
What?
isn't that like sorry? Okay, so that's
No,
Bikurim,
please.
but the count starts on the second day of
With
Pesach,
the,
though, right?
with the harvesting of the new grain of barley.
Yeah.
That's not Bikurim. Bikurim are fruits.
Okay.
They would go out in let's say, the orchards, and
Hmm.
they would see the first little buds, right? Because just think about it, if you come out with your trees full of apples, somebody says, oh, which were the first ones? So they would go out when the first buds were there, and they would tie little bands around the branch. And now when they came back and the tree was full with fruit, they would know that the ones that had the little bands around the branches were the first fruits. And those are the ones they would pluck and bring ceremoniously. It was a big ceremony. Whole cities would go with the first fruits up to Jerusalem. And there are even special laws that normally, if you're paying me to work for you, I'm not allowed to stop to take a personal telephone call, because that 3 minutes is money I stole from you. So when I'm working, unless of course you give me permission, but if you didn't, the default law is I can't do it. I'm stealing from you. So it says that the people in Jerusalem, who were those of whom were paid employees, when the marches of the people from the countryside would be coming in with their first fruits, with gold and silver and all kinds of things, and bands playing and so on. So it says they were allowed to stop working, to stand up and applaud the arrival, to make the people who made the journey feel important. That overrode their restrictions as a worker.
Okay. Well, that's neat. Um, okay. Well, okay. So on the first day of the Omer count, is that when the first barley sheaves were brought, or is nothing brought
Yes,
until
no, no, no,
Shavuot?
no, no. That's it. That's when the first barley was cut,
Okay. 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 So
and the new
during
wheat. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
oh, okay. So that day, the day that the first barley is brought, that starts the Omer count. It's that day that starts Omer count, and that goes for the 49 days. And that is the period of time that Moses went up to Mount Sinai.
No, that
Oh,
was before he went. It was at the end of that process or the end of that period that he went up. Which he went up on Shavuot.
oh
Shavuot is
right,
the
okay.
yeah,
Okay, so he went up on Shavuot, and then 40 days later, that's when he came down the first time.
and broke the tablets. That
Right.
was the time of the golden calf.
Yeah. And then the second time, when did that happen during the year?
He went up the next day, and he was there for 40 days and 40 nights, asking forgiveness for the golden calf, which he received. And then
Okay.
he came back down and said, "Listen, guys, we got a second chance here. I said, I'm going up one more time. Let's not screw it up again." So he goes back up on, and that 40 days when he came down the second time was the day before Elul. He goes back up now on Elul, and then 40 days later is Elul 30 plus those 10 days you were referring to, which is 40, which ends or culminates in Yom Kippur.
Okay.
And
And
that's the
then
second tablets.
when was it? I don't know how it is in Judaism. One of those times, is that considered when the Jews as a people became God's covenant people? Like during
That was the
one of
first time.
the first time when he came down the first time?
No, even before he went up, there was a whole thing that was happening before he went up. God said the first of the two commandments directly to the Jewish people. So of the 10 commandments, the first two of Anochi v'lo yeh, that was heard, sorry, of I am God and have no other, that was heard by the people without Moses as an intermediary. But what happened was, according to our tradition, numerous amount of people died and were brought back to life, kind of like Groundhog Day, Bill Murray.
The
And so
3,000, right? It was like 3,000 that
I don't remember the number,
okay.
but with whatever you got. And then an even larger amount of people were literally blown so far away that the angels had to grab them and bring them back. And so they said to Moshe, they said, "Look, how many more of these are there?" And he said, 611. So they said, what happens on 253 if we don't come back? So you know what? You just go up there, get as much of this stuff as you can. We're in, and just bring it down nice and easy. So that's why it says that they thought that they could die. And this was the first time that Moses said to them, "Don't worry, Eitz Chaim Hi, it's a tree of life. It's not a tree of death. You'll never die. Even if you shed your body, you will never die." So that all happened before Moshe then went up, and that was when they made the sacrifices and they sprinkled the blood, but then it was done again. I mean, it was done actually 3 times, the renewal of the covenant. What was even almost prior to Moses' death out in the desert Haran, I think you call it.
I'd have to yeah, I don't oh, Haran. That sounds
P
familiar.
A P A R A N maybe.
I'm not
P like
sure.
Peter. Yeah.
I'd have to double check. Okay. So
I could point it to you outside my window.
you can see it from there?
Sure. Well, I don't know about today, but if it's hot, it's too dusty because it's the
Okay.
Moab Mountains.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so this is really good. I'm learning some new things. So, sorry.
That's
Okay, so we've talked about 40. We've talked about 49 and 50, and I'm really that's really interesting to me to find out about Elul and um those 30 days plus the 10. Now it's like making more sense because I was like when I first learned about the 10 days of awe, I was like there must be like something to that. Is there something to the number 10 by itself?
for sure. God created creation with 10 utterances.
Is that the
There,
same as the is that the same as the Sephiroth?
no, no, no.
Okay.
Okay, we have a little engineering wire crossing happening here.
Yeah, okay.
They're not perpendicular, they're parallel worlds. Okay. So, in the sense of creation itself, God fashioned the 10 Sfirot, which are the operating vehicle of all creation on every level. But when it came to the fashioning and creating of this world per se, because the Sfirot go way beyond just this world, so what we call this world, you know what? I'm going to digress, but forgive me, because I think you'll like this. I was actually saying this to somebody just today, so I think you'll appreciate this. In our tradition, we believe, or we're told, or taught, that God created repentance, we call it tshuva, before creation itself. Now, I said to this, what? The fact that it was created means that's where creation begins. How could you have something created before creation? I mean, it's just simple. It says that God created the Torah before he created the world, creation. Well, no. If the Torah was created, then that's where creation begins. So the answer is that what we call creation might not be what we think of as creation. Because being the humans that we are and like to think that we're this concentric center of all universe and everything, it's not really the case, especially us crazy Hebes who believe that there are 180,000 other intelligent inhabited planets besides ours. So therefore, it simply meant that our world and our job as human beings with the rivers and the oceans and the sky and everything else about it, that this in medical terms, this operating theater that God is supervising for a particular reason, for a particular period of time, that's called creation. But there was a lot that existed before our creation, just as an aside. And there was so much aside, I forgot the point that you would ask me that you wanted me to address. I apologize.
Oh, just we're talking about 10,
10.
and then you'd mentioned the 10 utterances, I think.
Yeah, so the 10 Sfirot are on a mega level of creation. The 10 utterances, let there be light, let the trees bear fruit, and all those, find them in the opening chapters of Genesis, Bereshit. So
those are called utterances, and there's 10 of them.
There's one missing. Told you, man.
Okay.
Jews, right? So the one that's missing is the first, because if you look at it, you'll find 9 times where, and the Lord saith.
Interesting.
Right? But on the first time, when it talks about Bereshit, or creation, it doesn't say, not even saith. It doesn't say that at all. Why that is, that's because speech only exists in our world. So at the moment before this world existed, there was no speech. So the part of speech that would have said, and the Lord said, didn't have speech yet. But that you're piping smoking. So therefore, that idea is because it's pre-speech, even though it was spoke. Just like this was created pre-creation, even though it's part of creation. Okay, but the point is that it's 10. And that's why if you look at the 10 commandments in the original, if you look at the text over there, you'll notice that the first of them is not a commandment. All the other 9 are commandments. Don't murder, don't have adultery, honor your parents, observe the Sabbath, don't bear false witness, don't, I say in English, covet maybe your neighbor's properties.
Yeah, thou shalt not. Yeah.
Right. But not the first. It's not a commandment. I mean, it is a commandment, but it's not in the form of a command because it parallels the first utterance of in the beginning, where it also doesn't have a full revelation if you want. And then in the same, you now have reversed, like upside down, right? You know how the eye works? Like you see this, but the eye turns it upside down and then the brain turns it right back up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like right side up are the 10 utterances. Then came the 10 plagues in Egypt. And then came the 10 commandments to put everything back on its feet. So the 10 plagues are in reverse order, in a sense. If you actually want to have a fun time, write out the 10 plagues as you receive them in the Bible. Write out the 10 commandments and draw lines and see if you could figure out how the turning of the Nile of the river in blood correlates to uh, coveting, your neighbors, and so on and so on,
Hmm.
until you come to the death of the firstborn, and how that would relate then to the first one, which is I am God.
That is super interesting, and I may actually do that on
Yeah,
my
it's fun.
channel.
I've done it. It's a lot of fun. So anyhow, but the point back to your question, so that's where your 10 is a prime. It's interesting too, also all around the world, everyone uses the 10 number system counting. I
Yeah.
know Napoleon tried to change it, but obviously not too successful. I think it was the day before Waterloo. I'm just kidding. But everybody in the world, you go to China, they're using 10. You go to Argentina, they're using 10. It's sort of interesting because that is the biblical number system.
So interesting. Is it viewed? I thought this may have been on Kabad. That's like one of my resources I go to is kabad.org. I think they had mentioned that 10 is viewed as like a number of completion, I guess, like
Yes.
in the mathematical sense. So you have like 7 and you also have 10 in
Well,
their
no,
own.
7 is a complete cycle.
Okay.
10 is the completion of an entity.
Because of the 10 utterances.
Well, as well, in other words, the world was then filled. It was complete because of the 10 utterances. The lessons had been learned in the University of Hard Knocks, Egypt, because of the 10 plagues. The world had now been enlightened, although it chose darkness, to go, as I said before, from prophetic to pathetic, that the 10 commandments.
Okay.
So that's a completion of something. Like, for example, if you have a cup and it's completely full, that would be called 10, if you will. But if you have something that's going through time, a cycle, a complete cycle, will be called 7.
Okay. Okay. So 7, a complete cycle. 10, the completion of like the creation of something. And is that related to the 10 days of awe? Like the 10 days, is there that same kind of like concept there in any way?
Yes, and it's interesting. I thought you were going to ask a different question. Why wouldn't they be 7? Because, right, we just said 7 is a cycle, and that would be like a cycle. So it should be 7 days instead of 10. Okay. And in fact, it is 7 on one level. If you
Okay.
take out the three holidays of the 10 days, you have 7 weekdays, right? Rosh Hashanah 2 days is a rabbinic a rabbi idea. It's not sorry. It's forgive me. You'll have to edit this part out.
You're fine.
Okay. Um, you have the 10 days. You have in the Bible. Excuse me. Rosh Hashanah is only one day in the Bible. It became 2 days towards the end of the Second Temple. You have one Rosh Hashanah, you have Shabbat, and you have Yom Kippur, the 3 holy days in the 10 days, which means that you do have your cycle of 7 regular days. But at the end of the day, no pun intended, it is a total of 10. And of course, that's because on a personal level, you're trying to go through it's what it is. I'll tell you what it is. What the 49 days do in spring, where they spread it all out, in autumn, it's compressed into the 10 days. In other words, the 49 days, each one of the 7 weeks go through each one of the 7 accessible sfirot, because the 3 highest ones are not accessible. So you have the 7 which are within man's grasp. So therefore, going through each aspect of each one in the other is 7 times 7 is 49. But on Yom Kippur, everything is like concentrated. So therefore, you do an entire one of those 7 accessible sfirot in one day. And that's then, because Yom Kippur, you can even go to those which are not accessible, because those are the 3 holy days of the 10, because those are kind of like above the 7 mundane days, but you can even touch those levels, and that's why it adds up to 10.
You can do that on the 3 holy days or just on Yom Kippur.
No. Embedded in the 10 days are 3 holy days. Yom Kippur is one of them. Rosh Hashanah is another one. And the Shabbat that always comes out inside those 10 days is the third. So you have 3 holy days within those 10 days.
Okay. Okay.
And together they represent the 10, right? 10 Sfirot. Just show you another example of 10.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you did that. Obviously there would be like there's obviously order to how the human body is formed, and we've talked about that before, and that's like one example of it. Five, or I mean, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Um, and I guess while we're talking about that, is there like any correlation between fingers and toes, like symbolically?
Well, the fingers are the 10 sefirot of heaven, and the toes are the 10 sefirot of earth.
Oh, okay. So it's like it's like very visually represented as like higher and lower. The hands
Yeah,
are higher, feet are lower.
right.
That makes sense. Um, there's also like some other interesting numbers. So we've like when we're talking about like multiples of 10, so we've talked about 10 and we've talked about 50. There's also, I know that we've talked about this before, but you have 70. Does 70 always represent the nations, or is there like something deeper uh to 70? Because it is 7 times 10. I don't know if like that means anything, but what's special about 70, or what does it mean?
Okay, so let's dissect it down like you just did. 7 times 10. So 7 we know is a complete cycle, and
Mhm.
10 we know is a completion of something, right? Let's say, for example, of something is I fill this up to the top, that would be called a 10. Oh, you got that in diving, right? The perfect dive, they put up 10s.
Right.
Okay, they don't put up like 14.6. Okay, so the perfect dive is 10. This filled is 10. So these are, if you will, spatial, whereas the weeks and time are time, kind of coming back to the time and space of the two basic elements of creation. So 70 represents in a different way the completion of time. It's anything times 10 elevates it to its perfect level, if you will. And then there's an elevation to 100, an elevation to 1,000, but that's not for today. But in that elevation of 10, that makes it represents a perfect form. So a perfect example of the 7 days of creation would be 70. This is why King David said that he lived for 70 years, because he represented the perfection of what man can do with his life in this world of the 7 days, knocking the 7, timesing it by 10 to 70. There's also called 70 faces of the Torah, that the Torah is not merely understood on its simple written level, but they're actually 70 levels of understanding. I wouldn't tell you I know more than one level, but there are 70 other and there's 70 languages, and like you said before, there's also 70 nations, because this idea represents each nation except Israel represents a different aspect of the perfection of creation.
So with Israel not being one, so you would, if you added that, you would have 71. Is that how you would accurately depict that concept, is 71?
No,
And
no one would say it. I mean, maybe someone would do that, but it's incorrect. It would always be referred to as 70 plus 1, not 71.
70 plus 1. Does that idea show up anywhere else, 70 plus 1, or is it just like when we're talking about the nations in Israel?
Well, the idea of 70 plus 1 is, I mean, it's also 70 for the Jews, but it's not as nations. I mean, if you look in the Bible, you'll see that when Jacob, oh, I got something funny to tell you. Sorry, I'm home. Just remembered.
Sure.
I put people on the floor laughing in the last few days from this one. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll give it a shot. It says in the Torah that when Jacob came down to Egypt, he came with 70 souls. That's Souls,
Hmm.
as opposed to Soles. Anyhow, so you're going to have 70 souls. And the Torah even lays it out for you who they are. Now, if that's the case, why is that important to know? Well, because his family is forgetting my English, is the center of the circumference.
Okay. So
So
like the
each,
center point or whatever.
yeah, so each one of those souls, like if you think about it for a minute, let's look at this. You have like a circle here, and then you have an outer circle. and you're going to do the vector from the point of the inner circle to the outer circle, right? So if you now go to the circumference of the outer circle, that vector is going to go from here to here. But if you're here in the inner circle, it's just going to go from there to there. Right? That's how it expands. So if you think of the 70 souls in the middle, each one of those souls opens up and includes X amount of the nations, of which there's 70 nations. And each soul, one person of Jacob's family, correlates to one of the nations. So it's a microcosm of a macrocosm of 70, if you will. So that's why it's not 71, it's 70 plus 1. It's the 1 which is the center, and then the 70 which goes around it. And you're seeing that happen very, very fast in our time, that you will see once again, Israel will stand alone in the world. And there'll be those in the world that think, aha, look, the lamb is vulnerable. It's all alone without any protectors, and they will think that's the good time to come. But the sad news, will, for them at least, will be that they'll be no more foolish than the people who ran out when the tsunami water retreated.
You know, that actually brings me to this is just kind of a tangent, but I had recently been okay, so Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz with Israel 365, he did, this was back in 2018. He did an article where it was on Sukkot 7, where there was a large group of Jewish men. They were on the Mount of Olives and they were doing essentially a prayer. I can't remember the name of Sukkot 7. I know that it's like, isn't it like Rosh Hashanah or
Oh, you mean the seventh day of Sukkot? I'm sorry. You mean
yeah, the seventh day of Sukkot.
Yeah, not far. Hoshana Rabbah.
Hashanah Rabbah.
Right.
Okay, so what happened was there was a guy that was there that was praying with everybody else, and then they were looking at the Temple Mount because they were facing the Temple Mount, and there was like a mist that came up, and it wasn't explained. It was just like some like fog mist. There's video of it. Like I have the raw video. It's on YouTube. And so I guess Adam had interviewed a rabbi, talking to him about this story. He's like, that's actually really interesting that it would happen on that day because according to, I don't know if it's like the Talmud, that it's supposed to be that day that the war of Gog and Magog begins. Is that correct?
I'm not one to say correct or not correct, but I mean, it is known as the day that the nations are judged.
Okay. Well,
That
the way that this other rabbi was talking about it is he's like, well, that works out pretty well that there would be like this mist or fog on the Temple Mount because you could view that as like war taking place on like the spiritual plane, and like this is like a
I'm
visual.
on a Zoom call overseas, sweetheart. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry.
So he was just like, that's a pretty good visual for war because, with war you have dust and smoke and stuff like that. And so maybe this was some kind of uh, representation of warfare taking place on the spiritual plane. And so I was just I just wanted to basically confirm that if
I can't confirm that, but it leads perfectly into the joke I want to tell you.
Okay.
In our tradition, we believe there are only two people beyond any question of doubt that knew exactly when the Messiah will come. One of those people is Jacob, Yaakov, Israel, and it was on his deathbed. If you look there carefully at the sentence, it's strange because he starts to say one thing and then he switches to another thing without explanation why. And it says because he wanted to tell his children the date the Messiah will come, and God snatched it away from him. So you see, he knew it. The second one is Daniel. And you can take a look in the book of Daniel, and if you know how to read it carefully, and nobody's actually figured out the date per se, but clearly you can see that, and here's an interesting thing, by the way, a side point. For 25 points, was Daniel a prophet?
I would say yes.
So would I. Now let's think about that. You know that the Bible is divided into three departments. We call it Tanakh, which is an acronym. Torah, Nevi'im, which means prophets, and then Ksuvim, which means the writings. in the writings, you have, for example, see if I can do my English, Ecclesiastics. I think
Mhm.
that's the only one I could do in English. Then you have
Ecclesiastes, yeah.
Mishle, you have Proverbs, you
Mhm.
have the book of Esther, you have the book of Job, and you have the book of Daniel, not in the part of the prophets. But let's leave that aside. Okay. Everyone agrees that the two people who absolutely knew or know when the Messiah will come is Yaakov and Daniel. So how could you and I, if we wanted to know that secret, how do we find it? Well, the answer is simple. You drink an entire bottle of Jack Daniels.
Very
And
good.
by the time you finish the bottle, you'll either know when the Messiah is coming or you really won't care.
I guess we'll never find out in my church because we don't drink alcohol, so we're
I
screwed.
don't drink Jack Daniels either.
um, Going back really quick, this probably means nothing, but I had noticed that okay, so this war, the October 7th war, it started uh exactly 50 years and 1 day from the Yom Kippur War when it started. It's exactly 50 years plus 1 day. And then when I was looking at this story, I had noticed that that's on the solar calendar, of course, the Gregorian calendar. But on the Hebrew calendar, with this mist that arose on that particular day, it was exactly 5 years plus 1 day because the war started on that immediately after Sukkot, or the eighth day, or is it Shemini Atzeret? Is that
Yes,
what it's called?
that's it has two names. That's one of them. The other one is called Simchat Torah.
Yeah. So would there be anything to that, like 5 plus 1? Is there any sort of concept like that? I just find it really weird that on the two calendars you'd have like 50 years plus 1 day and then 5 years plus 1 day. Maybe there's no connection, but it's really odd to me.
Right. So my problem is I don't really relate to the solar calendar. So,
Yeah.
it's not something I would give obviously validity to it. But I mean, in terms of biblical references, I'm not really sure. I think we once sit down or on this video talk about the oddity of the current calendar. Didn't we do something about that once?
I don't know. I don't think so.
You're
Maybe.
younger than me. You're supposed to have memory.
Oh, I have the worst memory. And that's
Are
why on
you
my
kidding?
channel I have like all these spreadsheets like where I collect all this information because I have no memory.
Okay, that's why I have my name tag on the back of my. Okay, so listen, let's play a game for a minute. Do you speak any of the Latin languages like French, Spanish, Italian?
Spanish. Yeah.
Okay,
Or at least I
perfect.
used to. I've
No, no,
forgotten a
no.
lot
This
of
will
it.
be that's perfect for and now you know that all these languages come from Latin. That's where they
Hmm.
stem from. So how do you say 10 in Spanish?
The 8th.
That's right. And in Latin it's dis.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you have a month called December, what would that mean to you? The 10th month.
Oh yeah, we've talked about this.
We
Yeah.
did do this. I thought we did. Okay, see. So,
September, October. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
How could the 12th month be called the 10th month? And then you start to really look at the calendar and your eyes pop out of your head. It gets to get really, bizarro.
Yeah.
So, and what point was the calendar that's being used today? The calendar has went through a lot of changes and so on. I mean, the Hebrew calendar is the same as it's always been. So,
Yeah.
but you are right though. No, there is obviously. Look, we don't have a word called coincidence. We pronounce it coincidence. Everything has meaning and everything has wisdom because all operated by God. So therefore, everything, any letter, any number, everything, it's just a question if we have the strength to get deep enough to go to where that wisdom is embedded underneath the surface of what we see it to be. Sometimes God takes off the glove and it's really obvious. Other times it's like a mist, if you will, and everything is hidden. So I don't know how to answer your question in that sense, but it's by the fact that this war now broke out on Simchat Torah was a huge lesson for a lot of people over here who were not big fans of the Torah, let's just say. I mean, every life is precious, of course, but look at the communities that were really most devastated in Israel. These were the ones that had a political agenda of their brothers who they loved and cared for on the other side of Gaza.
Yeah.
So But whatever, I don't want to go down that path. I mean, I know that especially in America, it's a lot of talk about innocent civilians, and I have seen that Israel has posted, "Don't worry, we do not carpet bomb and we do not drop napalm, since we know how concerned you are about innocent civilian life." But besides that little, hypocrisy, the truth of the matter is that all the Yom Kippur War, we can't just say that was a coincidence, because we don't have the word coincidence. We have to understand what was the wake-up call here. So, I'll give you the good analogy. As a kid, I used to hate this. Maybe you did too. You go to the doctor and he had that flat stick to push your tongue down so he could look in there.
I hate that. Yeah.
You hated that, right?
Yep.
I hated it so much I could train myself to hold my tongue down. So, I don't need this, and he could just look in. That's
Didn't even know that was even possible.
Oh yeah, you can do it too. You got to really want to do it. It's kind of all, but you can do it. So I think of it like the same thing. When God comes in to see what the hell are they? I'm sorry, what the heaven are they doing down there on earth? Right? He's coming with a stick. But if you could get the tongue down, okay, I'll just take a look with a flashlight. But when you can't get that tongue down, then comes war in the world. Shake it up. It's interesting, by the way, in Hebrew, the root word for war is the same as bread.
Oh, is it? What is it again? Lechem?
Lechem is bread, and milchama, lachama, lechem, lechem, it's the
Yeah.
same word.
Oh,
That's why
interesting.
when we make our blessing on bread, we hold it with 10 fingers, and the blessing has 10 words, and the words are hamotzi lechem min haaretz, which means he takes the bread out of the earth. Well, the simple meaning is that God grows wheat or barley or what have you, spelt, and so the bread comes out of the earth. Fine, nothing wrong with the simple. But on a much deeper level, it means that he takes war out of our world. In other words, if we can channel it, that energy, which is war, if we can channel that into eating bread with the blessings of God, meaning that we bless God and thank God, that we recognize God, that is the diffusing of war in the world. But when we're too busy for God, too busy in doing our very important other things, we just knock God down to like a little visit on Saturday or Sunday. Hey, Dad. And then back to what we're doing. So that can bring war into the world. Are you old enough to remember men in skin bracer commercials?
What's it? What is it again?
Menon, Menen, I think. Menon skin bracer was it's like a cologne. But
I
they
don't
had
think
one that
so.
was
Maybe if I saw it, I'd recognize it, but I don't recognize it by that name.
well, it was one of the most famous award-winning commercials in America in its day. And what it was always had a guy in the morning, like shaving or whatever, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, but the camera's like behind the mirror looking at him. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, a third hand comes in, which isn't his, and goes like that, like slaps him in the face. And his line was, "Whoa, thanks, I needed that." But brilliant ad. Because not only remember the ad, you remember the product. Think about how many times you remember ads, you remember, wait a minute, what are they selling? But here, you remember, right? So here, that's what it's like with God. It's like, wake up. But if you wake yourself up, you don't need to be woken up.
Yeah.
But coming so back to what you asked, yeah, so for sure, have a war on Yom Kippur, have a war on, Simchat Torah, have an entire hotel blown up on Passover in Netanya 20 years ago.
And that,
Oh,
from a
wait, does
Jewish
that?
point of view, that'd be really important, right? Because in order for Messiah to come, there has to be like a certain amount of um basically keeping the commandments or performing mitzvah and like doing good work. So yeah, if you have more Jews that wake up spiritually and they return to their spiritual roots and do what they should, then it would increase the chances of Messiah coming, right?
Completely right. Except I want to just add to it. Messiah is going to come no matter what. The only difference is it completes the chances of him coming in a peaceful way.
Oh, so he could come either way. It doesn't
He
necessarily
will
depend
come.
on.
He will come either way. Our free will is you get to choose. Like the guy, like when the train checks, you get to which way the train's going to go. But the train's going to go.
So if that's the case, that's something that I didn't know, because I feel like every time that I've heard anybody talk about it, it seemed like it had to be because of good works. So if that's the case, is there a, because we were just talking about Yaakov and Daniel knowing the time. Does that mean that there is like a fixed, like a set time that he would come, or is it dependent
Yes.
on?
No. It's yes. Okay. So here I'll help you. I'm going to give you two biblical visuals that I'm sure you're very familiar with. One is the Messiah coming on the wings of eagles,
Okay.
and the other is riding a donkey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are the two paths. The idea of riding on the wings of the bird is boom, really fast. Everything happens really, really fast in a very beautiful, like a bird way, peaceful. Everybody looks at their guns and say, what? Breaks them in half or turns them into a plow, right? All beautiful, peaceful, all mankind realizes we're all created by the same God. Why the hell are we fighting each other? Right? Fighting another person is idolatry. And so we are one, and we wake up because we have the mental capacity once we can get our head on TikTok, right? The other one is, however, we don't. So the donkey. Now, the thing you might not understand is that in Hebrew, the word for donkey, chamor, is the same word as physical. So when man is not at all plugged into spiritual and elevating the world and working to tikkun olam, peace in the world, and globalization in a positive way, so then what happens is we get stuck deep in the physical, and then methodically, like riding on a donkey, which is very, very slow, according to its schedule, he will show. So the date that Jack Daniels gives you, it's written on the bottom of the bottle. You have to hold it upside down and look at it like that. It's not, just kidding. But it's
So from that point of view, though, like what you mean though is like not that he would come sooner or slower, but maybe like is it from like your, like from the world or the Jewish point of view? It's like, oh gosh, it feels like it's taking forever to happen because like we have to go through all these like horrible processes, so it feels longer like a donkey. But if it was like if we were living all righteously, then it'd be smoother and it would feel like it would come quicker. Would that be right?
almost. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
On the level of the donkey, there is a fixed date.
Okay.
That's the date that Yaakov and Daniel knew.
Okay.
On the level of the eagle, that could be at any moment. And therefore, what's happening is you have two parallel systems. Can't quite do the Egyptian thing. You get two parallel systems going to the same level. This one's going along like this no matter what, unless this one overrides that one by, boom, here comes Messiah now. So the shortening of the otherwise built into the initial programming, it can be short-circuited, will depend on actions, good actions.
Yeah.
But if not, then the default, which is not necessarily so positive, global nuclear war or what have you. So that's, I mean, I was in California, I saw a bumper sticker that said, a nuke would really ruin my day. So, God forbid. Anyhow, if there's anything else, please ask. Otherwise, I just need to be a little bit close to our hour today because I've got so much I have to catch. I apologize, but I hadn't seen you so long. I missed you. I missed your guys. And
yeah, we missed you too. It's been a while and people have been wanting to see you. So hopefully from here we can get to our just like our regular schedule of like every first Tuesday. Maybe the next one would be, since we're doing this here at the end of June, maybe we could do it the first Tuesday of August to be the next time.
My birthday month.
What was that?
My birthday month.
Oh, great.
August 18th.
All right, so yeah, this is a good place to wrap it up. I got all my questions answered that I wanted to ask. It was basically all about numbers and then a few other things. So I learned a lot during this one. This was really good.
Mutual.
All right, guys, if you have any questions or anything for next time, put it in the comments or send me an email and I'll try and take those down. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it and I'll talk to you guys later.